If you've ever looked back at a chapter of your life and thought, how did I let that happen? How did I not see it? I should have known better. If you've ever been harder on yourself for staying than you were on the people who hurt you, for trusting someone who broke you down, or for tolerating a version of life that slowly drained you. That moment when clarity finally arrives, it doesn't come alone. It brings guilt, it brings shame, and it brings that inner voice that says, you knew and you stayed anyways. That voice is loud, but it's not always telling the truth. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Rebuild Different. I'm Epiphany Page, and today we are talking about guilt, shame, and the lie behind I should have known better. Because guilt and shame love to show up after awareness. They show up once you finally see the pattern. And then that voice tries to convince you that seeing it late means that you failed. It doesn't. There's this moment that happens when things finally click. You zoom out, you connect the dots, and then you realize what was happening all along. And instead of feeling relief, your brain goes straight into self-attack. Why didn't I leave? Why did I tolerate that? Why didn't I trust myself? Here's what I've learned the hard way. You don't get to look back with today's clarity and judge yesterday's version of yourself fairly. That's not wisdom. That's just being too harsh to someone who didn't have what you have now. Responsibility says, now I see it, now I'm going to move differently. Shame says, I'm bad for not seeing it sooner. One creates forward motion, the other keeps you frozen in replay mode. Shame doesn't make you wiser. It just keeps you stuck, looking and feeling backwards. I want to be really honest here. There were several periods in my life where I knew something was just not right. I wasn't clueless, I wasn't unaware, I was just buried. I was dating someone who was emotionally abusive. He talked down to me, he cheated on me, he gaslit me, he made me feel small, confused, and constantly on edge. At the same time, I was working a job with an abusive boss, where I was criticized, controlled, and made to feel like I was never doing enough. So everywhere I turned, in my relationship, in my work, in my daily life, I was being reinforced with the same message, which was, you're not enough. You should be grateful. This is as good as it gets. That kind of environment messes with your sense of reality. It would mess with anybody's sense of reality. But I also knew that everything would collapse if I pulled the wrong thread too quickly. So I didn't try to fix my entire life all at once. I had to start dismantling it piece by piece. And this matters. It's not that I didn't know. It was just that I was surrounded by voices that were louder than my own. And that doesn't mean that I failed myself. It means that I was surviving. Trauma doesn't make you stupid. Depression doesn't erase your intuition. Anxiety doesn't mean that you lack awareness. They mean that your nervous system is trying to keep you alive. So yes, I knew, but it's like I wasn't in the driver's seat. I was in the car, I was awake, but I could just feel that something was off. I was just not connecting with the person that I knew I really was. But fear, attachment, exhaustion, and survival were the ones that were steering. And that's not weakness, that's biology. The inner critic loves to say that you knew, you ignored it, you stayed. But it leaves out the context. It ignores how depleted you were, how worn down you might have felt, how unsafe it felt to imagine everything falling down at once. But you didn't betray yourself. You were doing the best that you could with the capacity that you had. One of my favorite Maya Angelou quotes is, forgive yourself for not knowing what you didn't know before you learned it. We all should be a little bit easier on ourselves. I really want you to hear this, especially if you are watching and you're thinking, I don't have support. I don't have resources. I don't have everything figured out yet. You don't need to have everything in place to grow. You don't need to be completely healed. You don't need to be confident. You don't need permission because you already have the most important thing, which is the ability to learn and learn from your mistakes. Growth isn't about never messing up again. It's about not punishing yourself forever when you do. You are definitely allowed to say, I made the best decision that I could with the information and capacity that I had at the time. And then say, now I know more, so now I can move differently. That's not letting yourself off the hook, but that is accountability without being cruel to yourself. You don't become a better version of yourself by beating the current version into submission. You become better by allowing yourself to adjust instead of condemning yourself for not being perfect sooner. So if you're listening and you're in the middle of dismantling a life that no longer fits, a relationship, a job, a version of yourself, you don't have to fix everything at once. You just have to stop believing that one mistake defines you forever. You are allowed to learn, you are allowed to change, and you are allowed to give yourself grace while you're doing it. That's not weakness, that is wisdom. And that's what being rebuilt different looks like. So if this episode resonated, send it to someone who might be a little bit too hard on themselves. And I'll see you next week.